Hey, so I didn't memorize the recipe or like my intro, so I'm looking at my computer and the screen at the same time. Hope that's okay. Okay, so hey guys, I'm making a how-to video on my recipe BNS, which is a salty and sweet dessert. So I'm gonna break down how it translates to streetcar named Desire and the relevancy to the recipe. So, my first step is the recipe calls for three separate bowls at first. Then, when instructed, they will all be combined. So, the first step is use straining 2 cups of love. Before straining, make sure all love is washed off and dried completely. So, I use the verb straining when it comes to kitchen because I feel like straining is you're taking something away. So, when it comes to love, Blanche and Stella have a lot of love for each other. They're sisters, they're united, they're a team. But I feel like over the years and over the circumstances, there's been times where some of their love has got translated into different things. So that's why I said that their love was washed off and dried completely, because after something's been washed, it still has all the flavor, but it's different in a way. And so the next step is to process 1 teaspoon of power in a separate bowl. And I said, notice it is only 1 teaspoon because adding too much of power will make this dish a bit more bitter than it needs to. So in the play, we see a lot of power between Blanche and Stella. Either Blanche is holding the power or Stella's holding the power. And you never really see the two sisters holding power at the same time, if you get what I'm saying. Like in the beginning, Blanche is holding the power. She's the older sister. She's intimidating. She's all that and this. And then at the end, towards the end of the play, we see Stella holding the power, making the decision if Blanche stays or leaves. So that's why I noted that only 1 teaspoon of power, because in the play, we don't really see both of the sisters having power at the same time. So that's why I said that. And I use process because I feel like power is a process in the play, how it shifts from one sister to another. So that's why I use that verb. The next step is to add a dash of responsibility in the last separate bowl. And I said to make sure to freeze the responsibility so it's frozen before continuing. So I use the word dash because there is dashes of responsibility in each sister in the play. So with Blanche, it's being the oldest, being the leader, taking care of the family back home in the estate, and just having to grow up faster than she should have. And then for Stella, it's for when Blanche comes down to her town and she's getting carried away, she's drinking, she's bathing, she's reckless with her mouth. So Stella's having to take responsibility and care for Blanche and tell her what's right and what's wrong and instruct her for doing something that she will regret. So there's a dash of responsibility in both Blanche and Stella, but it's hard to see it in Stella, but it's also there. So I use the word bitter in that also because responsibility made both of the sisters bitter in two different ways. So Blanche was upset with Stella, obviously, for her having to stay behind and clean up after everyone, and Stella has this little bit of an attitude for having to watch out for Blanche all the time and having to stick up for her all the time, when there was instances where she would upset someone, so Stella would have to stand up for her, meaning Stanley, and that and whatever. So the next step, it's not the last one, is I said the next step is tricky. Now you will need to combine all the bowls with the different ingredients in them, starting with the dry ingredients. So mainly when you see dry ingredients in a recipe, it's normally the majority of the recipe. Like it's the biggest thing, flour, baking powder, sugar, salt, all of that. And I describe the dry ingredients as love and power because I feel like those are the two biggest aspects in Blanche and Stella's relationship. So I used those as the dry ingredients and I said pour love and power into a bigger bowl while mixing fast, and then slowly add the wet ingredient. So the wet ingredient is most important also in a recipe because it holds everything together. So I use that ingredient as responsibility, and I said to continue to mix them together. And then I said, once the consistency in the mixture is how you want it, grab 2 baking pans and spray them profusely and inarticulate. I did not pronounce that right. I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out how to say it, but I couldn't. But anyways, inarticulate is trouble communicating. And it's crazy because I think that's probably one of the biggest aspects in the relationship that is so confusing. That while they have all these emotions, it's really hard for them to communicate and tell each other how they really feel and describe what they're doing means to them. So I feel like that was a big one that I wanted to add in there to mean something special. So inarticulate in this recipe is like the canola spray or whatever. And so you're spraying that in those two pans because both Stella and Blanche have a big problem communicating with each other, and I feel like that's a big conflict in their relationship. And so I said, once pans are sprayed, pour all three mixtures of love, power, and responsibility into the articulated pans to bake in the oven at 350 for 20 minutes. Won't take long for these ingredients to make the most strong, salty, and sweet dessert. So in the end, it's kind of just like how a recipe would end. There's no special meaning besides the word strong. I said it won't take long for these ingredients to make the most strong, salty, and sweet dessert. So strong, I feel like represents if these two characters were in another circumstance and they had no problems communicating, they had no problems with power, they had no problems with loving each other unconditionally, would make such a strong combination. But even with them having those problems, they still have two very strong personalities that I feel like make salty and sweet. Because yes, they do butt heads, they have a trouble communicating, but they're sweet, they have love for each other. They will do anything for each other in the end. So that's why I put the last bit. But that is my how-to recipe on B&S, Blanche and Stella, and yeah.